it's out on Friday morning, so if it hasn't made the
Kia ora tātou, good morning everyone, and welcome councillors, staff, members of the public and the media to this November council meeting, and I'll ask Councillor Pipe to take us through the prayer, please.
O God, our Creator, bless us as we gather today for this meeting. Guide our minds and hearts so that we will work for the good of our community and help all your people. Teach us to be generous in our outlook, courageous in face of difficulty, and wise in our decisions. We ask this grace through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Full muster. Right, so no apologies today. Let's move to notices. Did we have a notice? No notice for today. The only thing I'd say is potentially the port presentation would be followed by Brewer Taniwha folk if they're all here, but we'll just see how that pans out. So that's at 11:15. Other than that, no notices. Conflict of interest declarations. Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the Regional Council meeting on 28th of October. For accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, 6, excuse me, 7, 8, page 9, page 10, 11. Someone happy to move on that basis? Thank you, Councillor Scott. We have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Dick. Put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Matters arising from those minutes. Very good. Thank you. Okay. Follow-up items. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, councillors. The follow-up items, with the exception of number 5, all have status comments attributed to them. So I'll ask Mr. Drury just to provide some comment around the annual plan progress report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 5 refers to background and review on the management of investments for this council. It's proposed as part of the annual plan workshop to put something together to go over financial strategies and investment objectives and performance. So that is being put together to present to council at that time.
So questions. I have one for Mr. Maxwell on item 2, application on hold for Otani wastewater. Just when is that actually due, and why has that groundwater sampling, why is it taking this length of time?
The information's due back from them in January next year. It's something that was identified through the technical review of their application and input from our science staff that this information was required in order for the consent to be processed. So hence they've been given a Section 92 request to go away and provide the additional information, and obviously we need to give them sufficient time to collect the samples and have them analysed. So it just takes a little while for that to happen.
And when is the consent full due?
Well, the consent's on hold in terms of processing it. So it's in terms of our statutory days, it's on hold while the applicant, HBRC, are collecting this additional information to satisfy our information request.
Follow up on that topic. With the microphone, please.
Can we at some point get an update on, I think we've had another cycle of monitoring results in terms of the workability of the 2 clarifier systems down there. Can we hear about how well those are working or not at some point?
Sure. I think, and Councillor Graham might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, that may be an update item on the next ENS committee. No, I don't recall. Isn't it? But if it's not, that's where it would go. So I'll see if we can squeeze it into that agenda, but I know that's pretty challenging.
If you could, that would be useful. Yeah. Okay, any other questions around this action item? Councillor Belford.
It's not on the action item, but we kind of sometimes skip over the Information Act request. I'm not sure where that gets addressed, but I have a question about it, if that's timely. And my request is simply, a couple of those items are listed as transferred, and they appear to be related to RWSS. So does that mean they were transferred to HBRC?
Yes, it does.
And does that imply that HBRC is in fact subject to the Official Information Act?
Yes, they have to provide the information if they've had a request transferred.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Belford's information request, where he's asking for names, positions, etc. I have a feeling that is a little intrusive in terms of privacy issues. Does the Chief Executive have a view?
There are Privacy Act implications for that. I'm not sure if Councillor Belford has received an official response yet, so may I just address that there were some parts of his requests that were answered, and some parts where that were not on the grounds of privacy. When I think, for example, the reason for leaving is people provide that in an exit interview form, and that's always there's a statement on there that that's only made available to appropriate senior staff. It is not public information.
Thank you.
Right, well, someone happy to move, then we move on. Councillor Scott, seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Belford. Discussion, put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Minor items not on the agenda. If I can find that page. Councillor Belford.
Ahuriri Estuary.
Yep. Yeah. I was hoping you were going to volunteer to do that, Councillor Bevan.
I don't know whether I'm the right person, but somebody needs to.
And
For some of the time.
on that same vein, Councillor Dick, the port opening, perhaps? The port, the building opening at the port, are you happy to? Anyone else? Thank you. Right. Let's then now go to the agenda. Item 7, affixing the common seal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see, we still continue to have a reasonable number of leasehold land sales. There are also a number of new staff who have been warranted to be able to carry out their work under various legislation that we operate under. And the final one, 1.3 over on page 12, there is a pretty blurry aerial photo, but it gives you an idea of, it's a piece of land in behind the Mariwa shops that's been sold to one of the adjacent landowners for car parking.
Mr. Chairman, in that regard, the map shows 3 properties owned by Dick Martin Keith, who happens to be my son. I'm not declaring an interest because he's not involved in the
He's not the
transaction.
vendor, no. The purchaser, no.
No. But where is 1A as a matter of interest? Doesn't seem to show on the map.
the area that's down the back between the buildings marked Hawke's Bay Regional Council. Yeah.
So that rather dark,
Yes.
obscured area.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Can you tell me how we come to own this piece of land and what on earth we're doing in the car park in the back of, behind Town and Country Electrical and backing on onto the other shops?
I might ask Trudy to come forward and try and answer that one.
It's a bit new, but
Morning, everyone. The reason initially we owned leasehold land, Marewa Shops, and we've sold them all off bar one section that's got a shop on it. And anyway, one day a year ago, the shop owners actually rang up. They said there's a storm coming and you haven't done any maintenance on your land and we don't want our shops to flood. So I actually referred them to Napier City because we don't own it. Anyway, Napier City came back and said, actually no, Regional Council, you own the car park. And it sounds exciting, but it's actually just a dirt track with lots of ruts. It's got a big sump in the middle that needs a lot of maintenance. It's actually not exciting or not anything to worry about. And it would cost us more to maintain it. There's the risk of flooding in the future. We gave option to all the shop owners to purchase it, and one vendor came back and so he's purchased it. But that was the only reason we actually found out that we owned it.
Can I have a follow-up question on that? I presume then this was part of the original small parcel of commercial lease, and that therefore we were not bound by the same rules of on selling that we are to residential leases, can only be sold to the leasee.
Well, I assume so. We went through Sainsbury Logan.
Yeah.
They've done the wholesale. That they've sold it.
Because if I'm correct, we did have a small parcel of commercial lease to begin with, and that actually comes under different rules, doesn't it?
Yes, you're right, Councillor, we did. But correct me if I'm wrong, Trudy, this has been sold to one of the lessees. Though.
Yes, it has.
Yes, but not the lessee who was leasing the land. There
There's
was
none.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not.
you're right,
not-
Councillor, would have
not
been
come
the
under
commercial.
the same
Would have
rules.
been the
Yeah.
commercial, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
How many other parcels of land do we own that we don't know? I mean, it's a serious question because
How can it be?
because these things do slide under the radar, and it seems to me that it'd be worthwhile, given this here, that we do a search of the registers around to see if there are any other parcels which are actually on the register as council-owned, regional council-owned land, which aren't on our books.
I'm quite happy to follow that up and find out. I'd be very surprised if something else does pop up, but.
I would be. Councillor Belford, you had a question?
Yeah, just, could someone explain, as we make these leasehold land sales, my understanding is we sold an income stream from these holdings based on a snapshot at a point in time. Here's what we own, here's what it generates. Somebody figured out a value of that and paid us for it. As the pot diminishes, does that have any effect on what they would expect as the value of this to them in terms of income flow? Or does that get adjusted as it goes, or what happens on that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. The properties were, the cash flows for the properties were indeed sold. It was a 50-year cash flow. 50-year cash flow, okay, and then it reverts back to the council after 50 years. So once these properties are sold, we're in the first few years of this agreement, once these properties are sold, the majority of that sale price goes to ACC. So they get a lump sum back, and you're right, they get they get less cash flows. It's not a situation that they're happy with, to be fair. But we didn't, they didn't, and we didn't think that would be such huge freeholdings of these properties, and it's all geared for two reasons. One, the rate of payment for the leases are going up, but most importantly, the interest rates are so low that people are deciding to freehold.
But Mr Chairman, these properties in question were sold about 25 years ago. So they just don't come into the equation with ACC.
Oh, Councillor, I think Councillor Belford was referring to the leasehold land sales back in number 1, the residential
Oh, I beg your
properties,
pardon.
yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just a supplementary to that, every council meeting, ever since I've been on the council, we have a list that's probably around about this long. I'm quite interested to know what percentage of or the number of sales that have now been made, and what percentage that represents of the total leasehold properties we hold, if that could be action for the next meeting, or do you know it?
Phone on.
Sorry. Currently, we have 236 single site sections left. We have 98 cross lease sections. That's the total. So with 334 left, and we had 1,900 to start with. So we're freeholding like crazy. This year alone, I've sold 19 sections, a mixture of cross lease and freehold. I have 7 in progress, still haven't got a settlement date, and I've got another 6 waiting for valuations. And yes, the rent's gone up, and you'd think that would impact hugely, but I've only got 14 rent renewals. So these freeholdings are coming not from the rent renewal that the rent's gone too high, it's actually people are now choosing to do it, which is fantastic.
Question. On the current trajectories, when would you expect all of the leasehold sections to be sold?
I actually wouldn't, because there's quite a few people that can't afford to pay to buy the land out. So I expect there'll probably be about 200 or so that we have because of financial circumstances, or if it's a cross lease, all 3 or all 7 houses have to decide to freehold, and some can't, some won't. So we will have a bundle that we'll keep, but I would imagine around 200.
And you'll get to the 200 when?
Don't really know, 5 years. It's on average it's about 40, 45 a year, so.
About 5 years at current rates, we've got to the call that won't sell.
Yeah.
Councillor Hewitt.
A couple of questions, and I asked the same. What's the value of the sales of these properties, roughly?
On average, a section's probably about 100,000.
Okay, so we're talking about 600 grand, roughly, here today.
Some of those are transfers, so they're not.
If it's a transfer, it's just the owners of the house have transferred. It's not a sale as such. We haven't sold the freeholding land, but it would be a transfer.
Okay, so 4. All right, thank you.
Yes. And sorry, just the car park's not worth anything near that. So you can't just, it's just average. It would be 100,000 a section, but some are lower, some are higher. Depends what area you're in. Different suburbs, Napier South, Mariwa, higher value, Piramai, Maraenui, lower value.
So just to put it into context with Councillor Belford's question, Paul, with, say, an estimated 400,000 here with these sales today, so are you saying the majority of that goes to the ACC?
Yes, Councillor, because they have actually paid for 50 years of cash flow. And when you get beyond the 50 years on a discounted cash basis, the cash flows beyond 50 years are not huge. But they don't get 100%, no. There's a calculation done as per the agreement, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have thought they probably got between 90 and 95%. Would that be about right? for now, but as we move through the 50-year contract, they'll actually get less than that, because there'll only be so many more years to run. They'll have already got cash flows for, I don't know, 20 years, and they've got 30 years to go.
Okay, and we get the residual. I mean, I'd understood we were selling these to be building up our nest egg to be investing in other projects.
No, we sold the nest egg. We actually ended up with that nest egg, and we transferred the cash flows. What is happening here is the investment that ACC's made for continued cash flows for 50 years, that's becoming less and less valuable to them.
And Liz, can you just explain these staff warrants to me a bit more, please? Because I don't think I've seen that before.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, a number of staff, particularly depending on the areas of council that they work in, require delegations under the acts that are listed there, and it could be for a range of reasons. It could be allow them to enter property, it could be to allow them to gather evidence, it could be for a civil defence emergency, things like that. So they're very standard clauses that a number of... So the staff that are listed there may all be required at some point to act under the Resource Management Act or particularly under the Soil Conservation and Rivers Control Act as well.
Right. Any final questions? Thank you. Someone happy to move, then we move on. Thank you, Councillor Scott. We have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Further discussion? I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no.